The bank manager scrutinized her, questioned her statements, and denied her deposit. However, within minutes, a single declaration transformed the situation. She's my mother, and I own this bank. The automatic doors of Hillstone Federal Bank opened with a hiss, allowing the late morning sun and the deliberate steps of 73-year-old Gloria Hightower to enter. She moved with a cane, not due to necessity, but because she preferred the stability it provided. Her dark green dress was neatly pressed. Her silver hair was arranged in the familiar style she's kept for decades. She held her purse in one hand, the other holding a check bearing her name. Gloria was familiar with this location. She had banked here for almost 15 years. The same branch, the same routines. She typically came in during the week, shortly after breakfast with friends at Janine's diner. However, something felt amiss today. The woman at the front desk hardly looked up when Gloria entered. Not even a greeting. That was out of the ordinary. Gloria dismissed it as insignificant. Perhaps the staff was understaffed. It was possible the young woman hadn't been taught to acknowledge older customers. She proceeded to the counter and waited calmly behind a man wearing a baseball cap. After several minutes passed, and when it was her turn, the teller, a young woman, approximately early 20s, offered a hesitant glance over Gloria's shoulder, then murmured, "One moment, please." She then went into a back room. Gloria remained standing quietly, still holding her check, still smiling gently. Shortly afterward, a tall woman wearing a light gray blazer came forward. Her features were distinct. Her blonde hair was pulled straight back, and her eyes appeared analytical rather than observant. A name tag identified her as Leslie Ryland, branch manager. "May I assist you?" Leslie asked, crossing her arms. Gloria raised the check slightly and responded, "Yes, I need to deposit this into my savings account." Leslie did not take the check. Instead, she examined it, then looked back at Gloria. "Could I see your identification, please?" Gloria readily replied, retrieving it from her purse. She presented her driver's license and the check. It originated from a retirement account payout, a standard occurrence. Nothing appeared suspicious. Leslie scrutinized the identification for an extended period, an unusually long time. She then re-examined the check. Leslie then inquired, "How did you come into possession of this?" Gloria appeared surprised. "I'm sorry," she responded. Leslie clarified, waving the check. "This check is for a significant amount. We are obligated to verify it before processing. We have encountered similar situations previously." Gloria responded, tilting her head. "I have deposited checks like this here before. There had never been a problem before." Leslie offered a strained, unconvincing smile. "Banking policies have been revised," she stated. "I'm sure you appreciate that." A gentleman seated nearby subtly adjusted his position. Gloria noticed it from her peripheral vision. The woman standing behind her made a quiet noise. Gloria sensed that someone was observing them. Gloria inhaled deeply. "Ms. Ryland, I have all my required documentation. This is my account. I have been receiving direct deposit, and I've been a customer at First National Bank for years. My name, my address, and my identification all correspond perfectly." Still, Leslie remained firm. "We still require a more thorough verification. Please come with me to the back." That's when Gloria experienced it. Not fear, not shame, something akin to offense. Not just for herself, but for every older woman who had been spoken down to. For every person who had been regarded with suspicion simply for entering a room. "I prefer to remain here," Gloria stated resolutely. Leslie moved closer, softening her tone. "Ma'am, you must cooperate, or we will have to place a hold on the funds and report potential fraud." Instances like this have occurred previously. That's when Gloria experienced a tightening in her chest. She wasn't inclined to engage in a dispute, not with an individual of this nature, not in the presence of onlookers. However, she wasn't planning to depart, so she opted to retrieve her phone. Gloria's hands moved with measured precision, steady rather than trembling, as she extracted her phone from her purse. Upon the screen illuminating, Leslie's gaze narrowed. "I am contacting my son," Gloria stated calmly, scrolling through her contacts. "He will resolve this situation." Leslie gave a humorless chuckle. "Ma'am, Contacting your son won't alter procedure. We operate under established guidelines. If there's no cause for concern, there's no need for alarm. Gloria didn't respond. She simply raised the phone to her ear and moved a pace to the side, distancing herself from the counter. She was weary of being addressed, as if she lacked understanding, as if she were incapable of handling her finances. Two tellers positioned behind the glass exchanged glances. The young man at the end of the line advanced a short distance, seemingly about to speak, but then stopped. The room was quiet, punctuated only by the gentle clicking of keyboards and the quiet whir of a copier in the corner. "Hey, baby," Gloria said into the phone. "I'm at the bank. Hillstone on Meridian. They're having difficulty verifying my check again." She paused. "Yes. Her name's Leslie." Leslie's jaw tightened. "Excuse me, ma'am. Sharing employee names over the phone is something we avoid." Gloria didn't acknowledge the request. Acknowledgement. "I'm feeling well, just a bit tired." Following a brief silence. "Okay, I will remain here." She disconnected the call and returned the phone to her purse. Subsequently, with the same composed demeanor, she stated, "My son is en route." Leslie folded her arms. "Ma'am, I must reiterate. Elevated voices or disruptive behavior may result in dismissal." Gloria inclined her head slightly. "Do I appear to be causing a problem?" Leslie's face reddened. She averted her gaze momentarily, then returned her attention. "I have a duty to safeguard this establishment. Improper fund verification puts the bank at risk." "Do you believe I am a risk?" "I believe you're not being helpful." Leslie retorted sharply. That was the breaking point. That single word. The man standing 2 places back murmured something quietly. The woman behind Gloria moved closer and said, "She is being courteous. You are the one raising your voice." Leslie addressed them. "Please refrain from interfering. We are conducting a private transaction." "It doesn't seem very private," the woman remarked. Gloria remained silent throughout the exchange. She felt no need to dispute anything or offer explanations. She simply needed to wait. 5 minutes elapsed. Leslie moved away, feigning a check of her computer, but her gaze kept lifting, much like a dog anticipating the mail carrier. The young teller from earlier approached and murmured something into Leslie's ear. Her gaze moved towards the entrance. Then the glass doors opened once more. A man entered, dressed in a charcoal gray suit. He appeared to be in his early 40s, wearing a crisp white shirt, but without a tie. He seemed calm, yet focused, and moved with a quiet, purposeful stride. He made no visual sweep of the room, instead walking directly towards the lobby center, toward Gloria. "Hi, Mama." Gloria returned a gentle smile. "Hey, baby." Immediately, the room's atmosphere altered. The man turned to address the reception desk. "Is there an issue with my mother's account?" Leslie moved forward, hesitant about whether to extend a handshake or request identification. She opted for a formal nod instead. "This is your mother?" he asked. "Yes," he responded briefly. "My name is Grant Hightower." Leslie's mouth opened slightly. Her gaze shifted around the room, then returned to Gloria, then to Grant. "Mr. Hightower?" Grant retrieved his leather card holder and laid it on the counter. It displayed his ID, his business card, and his title, Hillstone Federal, Executive Board Chair. Leslie found herself unable to speak. For a full 10 seconds, silence filled the room. Leslie's gaze remained fixed on the card, as if expecting it to ignite. A subtle muscle spasm flickered across her cheek, the type that arises when a mind struggles to comprehend what the eyes have witnessed. Grant refrained from speaking quickly. He kept his hands clasped before him, standing composed and silent, his voice even but undeniably resolute. "I'm asking one more time," he stated. "Was there a problem with my mother's account?" Leslie hesitated, then asked, "Mr. Hightower?" "We were just following procedures. Large checks need to be verified, and I—" Grant interrupted, not loudly but sharply. "You looked her in the face and decided she wasn't credible. You questioned where the check came from. You asked how she came into possession of it. Does that sound like standard procedure?" Leslie's mouth opened again, but no words came. Her face had gone a full shade lighter. "I've reviewed those procedures myself," Grant continued. "I approved those actions last quarter." That documentation contains no instruction to question a long-standing customer while disregarding her identification. Certainly not with a public display in front of witnesses. The bank was quiet. The only sounds were the clicking of keyboards from employees appearing to work and the consistent hum of the air conditioning above. No one was willing to avert their gaze now. Gloria stood nearby, arms folded. She wasn't smiling. She didn't seem pleased. She seemed weary. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Hightower," Leslie stated rapidly. "This is simply a misunderstanding. I didn't intend to offend anyone." "But you did," Grant countered. "You humiliated her." "I didn't." "You did," Leslie replied. Grant's voice remained even. That was what made his statement so impactful. There was no shouting, no theatrical displays, just the facts, just his presence. Leslie's voice trembled. I didn't realize she was your mother." Grant looked at her. Why would that change anything? Leslie started to speak, then stopped. "Do you understand how that sounds?" he inquired. Leslie spoke the words aloud. For the first time, Leslie genuinely observed Gloria. She truly looked. It wasn't solely embarrassment now visible on her face. There was fear. The fear of repercussions. "Have a seat," Grant said, indicating the chair behind the counter. "I'll handle the deposit." Leslie paused. That wasn't an invitation. Leslie turned slowly and walked toward the back, her shoes clicking hollowly against the tile. Grant approached the counter, took the check, glanced at it, and typed a few numbers into the system. The young teller observed with admiration. "Here you go," he said, giving the receipt to his mother. "Full deposit. Effective immediately." Gloria accepted the slip, folded it, and nodded. "Thank you, baby. Are you okay?" "I'm fine." They paused, a mother and son in a peaceful setting. Then Gloria remarked, "You didn't need to come all the way here." Grant gave her a look. "Yes, I did. But you're busy. You have meetings. Aboard a run." He shrugged. "You managed a household for 25 years with one income, for kids, and a Buick that barely started. I can spare a few minutes." She chuckled softly. "You always were dramatic," he smiled. "And you always were the calm one." But the moment wasn't over yet. Grant turned slowly, letting his eyes sweep the room. The customers remained present, some appearing to examine their phones, while others paused during transactions, attempting to blend into the background while still observing everything. The woman positioned behind Gloria retreated slightly, creating room for them. The man who had spoken previously offered Grant a discreet nod of acknowledgement. Grant made no direct comments to them, but he did not dismiss their presence. He understood they would retain this moment, each in every aspect, not only due to his identity, but also because of what they witnessed. A woman felt diminished until the reality arrived, formally dressed. Leslie's absence was brief. She returned with a senior associate, visibly anxious, restless, attempting a smile, but unable to manage it. The older man spoke quietly to Grant, extended an apology, then indicated the rear offices. But Grant remained still. "She is well now," he stated, pointing to his mother. "However, this is no longer a simple exchange." Mr. Hightower began. "We absolutely recognize that, and we're taking it seriously. Ms. Ryland has been here less than a year. She's still adjusting to the—" "Stop," Grant interjected. "Don't explain her behavior to me. That's not your job. That's hers." Leslie remained still, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She appeared to be attempting to suppress tears, or perhaps prevent herself from speaking. According to Grant, addressing the associate, the task at hand is to assess the situation within this room and grasp the implications of a valued client being subjected to treatment resembling that of a criminal, solely due to her appearance not aligning with the image of someone who owns a yacht. Grant emphasized, raising a hand, "Have you ever met someone resembling my mother and considered she must be concealing something? Have you ever scrutinized a white customer depositing a check?" The man visibly recoiled. "That's not." "Don't deceive me," Grant stated. "I'm not the board chair today. I am simply a son. And what I observed this morning was a woman who instilled in me the values of honesty, patience, and respect, being questioned as if she had fabricated her own signature." Gloria eventually intervened. She said, "Baby," but Grant wasn't done speaking. He stated, that she could have been questioned with courtesy. She could have been spoken to privately, and any concerns explained. Instead, a public spectacle was created, and she was made to feel unwelcome. The only reason for the interruption was my appearance in a tailored jacket. A silence followed. Gloria surveyed the room, noting the expressions, some filled with shame, others with anger, still others with inspiration. She lightly touched her son's arm. "Let's leave," she said quietly. "Let's not say another word." He faced her, his jaw rigid, his chest tense. But then he saw it in her eyes. That familiar calm. The same calm she possessed while working 2 jobs and still preparing dinner. Amidst challenging circumstances, she demonstrated remarkable poise. He acknowledged this with a nod. All right. They proceeded toward the exit together, navigating past the tellers, the customers, and the visibly shaken manager who struggled to meet her gaze. As they prepared to leave through the doors, Grant paused. He turned, looked at Leslie, and said softly, "Every customer who walks in here deserves the same respect you'd give your boss. Because you never know who they are or who raised them." They departed, but the repercussions were just beginning. As Grant and Gloria reached the sidewalk outside, his phone was already vibrating. Initially, it was his assistant, then a member of the board, and subsequently the bank's general counsel. The news had spread quicker than either of them anticipated. A customer had captured a portion of the incident on video. It was already being shared. Gloria observed him. "You won't answer that." Grant allowed it to continue ringing. "No, not at this moment." They continued walking at a slow, even pace, the sun warming Gloria's head as cars passed leisurely down Meridian Avenue. She remained silent initially. So did he. It was a moment of quiet they both required. "You don't have to rush down here," she eventually said. Grant chuckled but didn't smile. "I say that every time." He added, "I can handle myself." "I know you can," Gloria replied. She stopped before a bench and sat down. Grant remained standing close by, looking at his phone screen without unlocking it. The notifications accumulated, resembling stacked bricks. However, he wasn't prepared to construct anything from them just yet. Within the bank, Leslie Ryland remained motionless in her compact glass office. A regional manager had already contacted her. Human resources required a report before the day's end. Yet, none of that held significance for her at that moment. The image of how Grant had regarded her lingered in her mind, as if revealing a perspective that diminished her, not through disparagement, but because it highlighted the limitations of her own assessments. The subsequent morning brought forth a communication from Hillstone Federal's board. It announced the commencement of an internal investigation, alongside assurances that customers will be notified regarding adjustments to sensitivity training and customer relations policy. However, this represented merely a public statement. The truly significant developments unfolded privately. Later that week, Grant took his seat at the head of the conference table, the familiar space typically used for investment strategy and profit reports. This meeting, however, had a different purpose. "I want every manager to recertify on customer service protocol," he announced, "but not with those same corporate videos from 5 years ago. We're engaging outside instructors. I don't want lectures. I want eye contact, role play, and reflection." An older board member expressed surprise. "That's a significant change." "It should be," Grant responded. "What about the manager?" Grant hesitated. He was reluctant to dismiss Leslie, not because she didn't warrant consequences, but because he didn't want this to appear as retribution. That wasn't the upbringing his mother provided. "She is suspended," he stated eventually, "subject to review." However, his focus is on addressing the underlying cultural issues that led her to believe that kind of conduct was permissible. Later that evening, Gloria settled into her preferred chair near the window at her home. The house was quiet, punctuated only by the ticking of the old wall clock and the gentle simmering of her evening tea. Grant was settled on a couch, his tie undone, his shoes slightly loosened. "You handled it well," she said. He shrugged. "I let myself get angry." "You should have," he replied, looking up. "You're not upset," Gloria said with a wry laugh. "Darling, I've experienced far more challenging situations." She continued, "This isn't the first instance someone has attempted to make me feel like I don't belong, and it likely won't be the last. That's the most troubling aspect, Grant stated. She took a sip of her tea, acknowledging that this wasn't a new situation. You can't control how people treat you, Grant said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. Only how you respond to them. Gloria smiled. I just dislike that you had to deal with that kind of behavior at this stage in your life. That's the interesting thing, she replied. The older I become, the less it affects me. What caused me pain wasn't her words. It was the fact that she believed she could speak to anyone in that manner. She paused. Perhaps now, she won't. Despite the difficulties, a positive outcome eventually emerged. The subsequent week, Gloria revisited the bank. She wore the same shoes and carried the same purse, but her demeanor had changed. Upon entering, every employee behind the counter visibly adjusted. The newly appointed temporary manager, Denise Alvarez, a woman with a quiet voice, approached the desk to greet her directly. Miss Hightower, she said kindly, we are pleased to see you. Gloria offered a slight smile. I'm simply here to withdraw some funds. Certainly, I will assist you myself. As they walked toward the counter, Gloria observed that the posters on the wall had been updated. The advertisements for loans and savings plans remained, but new posters, a series titled Respect is Standard, now hung near the front. Each featured portraits of real customers from the local community, all sharing the same tagline. We see you. We serve you. We respect you. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was a beginning. Denise processed her withdrawal, demonstrating patience and clarity. Straightforward and professional. Before her departure, Denise stated, we're holding community meetings beginning next month. These will be listening sessions. Grant asked us to invite value customers like you. Would you be willing to speak? Gloria expressed surprise. You want me to deliver a speech? The response came, not a speech. Simply share your story, however you prefer. Gloria considered the request. I will attend, but I won't present anything in a misleading way. That's precisely what they wanted. She left that day not feeling entirely satisfied, but she felt acknowledged. And at her age, that carried weight. Later that evening, Gloria sat across from Grant again, this time at a quiet booth inside an old barbecue joint in Fort Worth they both liked. It smelled like hickory and cornbread, and nobody there seemed to notice what either of them did for a living. You remember that day you got in trouble in 7th grade? She asked suddenly, picking at her baked beans. Which one? The incident with Mr. Hale came to mind. He accused you of plagiarism regarding your paper. Grant sighed. Yes, he recalled. You returned home holding that paper, visibly upset. Tears streamed down your face as you insisted you hadn't cheated. And he believed you. Yet, he still made you rewrite the entire paper. He chuckled. You said that rewriting something sometimes demonstrates its originality. She affirmed exactly. Grant turned to her. But that's what happened? Gloria replied negatively. It seemed this occasion required assistance from another. He paused, allowing the statement to resonate. Then she added, I didn't raise you to be rich, Grant. I raised you to be right. He glanced at her across the table, a palpable feeling just below the surface. I know, he responded. And sometimes, she continued, doing the right thing means you forfeit ease. You enter spaces that aren't welcoming. You voice your thoughts when silence would be simpler. And you visit the bank even when it feels demeaning. No matter the circumstance, it impacts those who care. He blinked once, twice, then smiled. You know, you really should speak at that meeting, she said. Oh, I will, Gloria replied. But I'm bringing my purse, my cane, and my full voice. No softening at this time. Grant laughed. You never softened it. You just made it sound kind. She grinned, then picked up her napkin and dabbed the corner of her mouth. Kind doesn't mean quiet. The situation didn't conclude there, as Gloria had further remarks. A community meeting took place 3 weeks later within a simple civic center located just off Lancaster Avenue. There were no special decorations and no filming crews were present. Instead, attendees found folding chairs, a podium, and a hand-painted sign that read, Listening Circle, Hillstone Federal Bank. Upon Gloria's arrival, the room was already half full, comprising both bank staff and customers. The gathering included older folks, young professionals, small business owners, and a few individuals she didn't recognize, presumably there to observe or report. She wore a cobalt blue blouse that highlighted the silver in her hair. She avoided flashy jewelry, opting for her usual pearl earrings, the same pair she wore to her granddaughter's graduation. Upon her arrival, the conversation quieted. People turned and heads lifted. Grant was seated near the front, but remained seated. He understood his mother didn't require an escort. Not on this day. When it was Gloria's time to address the gathering, she didn't immediately move to the podium. Instead, she positioned herself just beside it, close enough to be easily heard, but maintaining enough distance to make eye contact with everyone present without unnecessary ceremony. The room fell silent. She cleared her throat. I'm Gloria Hightower. I'm a retired school nurse. I've resided here for more than 40 years, and I'm a client of Hillstone Federal for almost 15 years. There were some nods, some quiet acknowledgments. I am here today because I was asked to recount my experience. However, this extends beyond what occurred that morning at the bank. That portion is straightforward. I experienced disrespectful treatment. I was questioned regarding a check bearing my name. I was made to feel out of place. This wasn't due to anything I said, nor was it due to anything I did. It was solely based on my appearance. Her voice remained steady. It didn't waver, but it resonated low, full, and unwavering. Initially, I wasn't angry. I felt pain. I was certain I had committed no wrongdoing. Nevertheless, someone deemed me questionable. Someone decided my dignity could be compromised. She paused, allowing those words to resonate. I intended to remain silent, simply contacting my son and waiting, calmly. However, I came to understand something later. People rely on silence when they behave in such a manner. They depend on our courtesy, our tolerance, our weariness. But occasionally, the most honorable course of action is to object. A hush fell over the room. My intention isn't to damage anyone's professional standing. This isn't about retribution. It's about achieving change. Not for my benefit. I am 73 years old and possess a sufficient understanding of the world. But for the individual who next enters a bank with trust and departs feeling diminished. A man positioned towards the rear dabbed at his eye. A woman seated across the aisle gripped her notepad without putting pen to paper. Gloria rested her hands in her lap. We reside in a nation that frequently discusses principles of equity, regarding values, regarding treating everyone equally. But those ideas hold no substance unless they manifest in everyday interactions. At the checkout, during phone calls, in the way we address someone who appears different. She glanced at Grant briefly. He offered no smile. He offered no nod. He simply observed her the way one observes a fire that warms and humbles simultaneously. Thank you for listening, she said, then stepped back without fanfare. The room did not erupt in applause. It did not require it. A few hands clapped gently. A few heads bowed. But what lingered was heavier than noise. It was reflection. After the meeting, people lined up, not for handshakes or photos, but to talk, to share. One woman said she'd experienced the same thing at a different branch. A young man said it reminded him of the way his grandmother used to be followed around stores. And the bank staff, well, most of them just said thank you, with eyes that conveyed more than their words. That night, while Gloria sat in her kitchen with tea in hand, Grant texted her, "You were incredible." She responded slowly, "They'll remember that." She continued, "I didn't do it to be remembered. I did it so they remember each other." Denied entry to a luxury restaurant due to appearing out of place. The following day, a black SUV arrived, and no one anticipated who emerged. Charlotte's son was exhibiting his characteristic behavior in early spring, brilliant, somewhat showy, reflecting off every glass building downtown. Ideal weather for finalizing a deal. Cassandra Belton had recently concluded a walkthrough of a young couple's first home, a small 3-bedroom with creaky floors and considerable potential. She found them appealing, these newlyweds, diligent individuals who still embraced the idea of constructing things from the foundations. She recognized aspects of herself within them. At 52, Cassandra had accomplished precisely that, establishing something from nothing. Without inherited wealth, she took no easy routes. Instead, she relied on time, perseverance, and a determination to continue. She wasn't ostentatious. Such displays weren't necessary for her. Her self-assurance manifested in her demeanor, in how she occupied silence in a room without needing to assert control. Following the showing, she drove 5 minutes to Le Mistral, a high-end restaurant on Tryon Street. She hadn't intended to dine there. It simply occurred to her as she stopped at the last traffic light. Indulge yourself, Cass, you deserve it. She parked her Lexus, glanced at her phone, and exited the vehicle. She wore no blazer, only a crisp white tee tucked into tailored dark jeans and gray suede flats. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, and she wore no makeup aside from gloss. The ensemble presented a polished and sophisticated aesthetic, suitable for both a casual cafe and a formal boardroom setting. The hostess provided a brief assessment, offered a rehearsed smile, and escorted her to a table for two situated by the window. The lunchtime rush hadn't begun. Cassandra reviewed the menu, already anticipating the grilled salmon with couscous. However, even before her water was served, he arrived. He seemed to be around 38 years old, with a strong jawline and slick-back hair, and an excessive amount of cologne. His expression featured a smile that seemed to mask something deeper. "Ma'am," he said, approaching her table as if he'd practiced, "I'm afraid we have a dress code here." Cassandra looked up slowly. "Excuse me? The restaurant requires a particular standard. Our guests generally appreciate a more refined appearance." She blinked. "I'm wearing clean clothes, I smell like spring, and I just closed a $500,000 sale 2 blocks from here. I'd say I'm pretty refined." A pause. His smile became less relaxed. "We've received complaints." She tilted her head. Whose concerns were these? He looked toward the front desk, then back to her. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." There was no disturbance. Cassandra didn't raise her voice. She didn't weep. She posed a single question. Calmly, steadily. "Is it my clothes? Or is it my skin?" He didn't respond. Instead, he indicated toward security. A young man, clearly feeling awkward, approached and in a hushed tone requested that she collect her belongings. She rose, retrieved her purse, and exited. A heavy silence followed her every movement. Outside, she settled into her car, closed the door, and stared straight ahead for a significant period. She made no calls and created no videos. However, someone else did. A woman, seated in a corner booth near the bar, had observed the entire incident, recorded it, and uploaded it online, tagging the restaurant and local news outlets, along with numerous other accounts. By sundown, the video had accumulated 230,000 views. By midnight, it reached 2.3 million. Cassandra's phone began to receive numerous notifications. Her assistant, her nephew, clients, even someone from the Charlotte Observer had tried to reach her. But she didn't answer, because Cassandra wasn't going to react. She was going to respond. And those are two very different things. By the time the sun rose over Charlotte the next morning, Le Mistral had a problem. Not a small, quiet problem they could handle with a quick direct message or a vague apology. No, this was national. This was loud. The situation escalated to the point where legal counsel and public relations professionals were joining early morning Zoom meetings, even before their coffee was finished. The video itself was brief, just 37 seconds in length. It began with a composed black woman seated near a window, looking down at her menu. The restaurant appeared almost deserted. A quiet clinking of silverware could be heard in the background, along with the gentle sound of soft jazz. Then, he appeared, the manager. He approached as if offering a beverage, but his body language was inappropriate. His voice was understated and excessively courteous. There was a strange formality, the kind people adopt when they feel they've made a mistake, but still want to maintain composure. The viewer didn't hear everything that was said, but they understood enough. Phrases like "we have a dress code" and "concern skew to leave" were audible. The camera subtly shifted, revealing Cassandra rising. She remained silent, simply gathering her purse. Then a single quiet sentence hung in the air. "Is it my clothes? Or is it my skin?" That was the pivotal moment. The entire comment section paused, replaying the scene and watching it again. That statement resonated unexpectedly with audiences. It wasn't delivered with raised voices. It wasn't a formal address, simply a question. Yet it had a powerful impact. Initially, Twitter reacted strongly. Subsequently, TikTok followed suit. Facebook then saw a wave of lengthy posts from individuals who had similar experiences. Gradually, people began investigating. Who was this woman? Why hadn't she previously spoken out? It emerged that Cassandra Belton wasn't just an ordinary customer. People started linking pieces of information together. She consistently ranked among the leading black real estate brokers in Mecklenburg County. Last year, she was highlighted in Charlotte Real Estate Weekly. A quiet professional, she maintained a record free of controversy and sensationalism, building a career on consistent success and a reputation for ethical conduct. Several former clients shared their experiences. One recounted how she assisted her mother in purchasing a first home following the loss of her father. Another shared that she hadn't been charged the full commission, with the broker stating her desire to provide support. A third client also wrote, "Ms. Belton assisted me in resolving a difficult mortgage situation. She was invaluable. I consider her a remarkable person." Cassandra remained silent. Media representatives were stationed outside her office close to South Park. Her assistant denied them access. Respectfully but assertively, she stated that she was not prepared to release a statement. Le Mistral, however, issued several public statements. Initially, they released a routine message. "We are cognizant of an occurrence involving a patron and are assessing the issue internally." This statement was met with derision online. What happened? The video was clear. The woman didn't yell. She didn't make a scene. She didn't even finish her appetizer. And yet she was escorted out as if she'd caused a disturbance. The restaurant's Yelp and Google pages were inundated with one-star reviews. Apparently, racism was present. One person wrote a review. Another posted online, "Be mindful of your appearance or identity, it seems." The manager from the video, whose name eventually leaked, was Owen Lindley. He had been employed there for 3 years. Previously a hospitality manager in Naples, Florida, she was recognized for her stringent standards regarding presentation. An anonymous former employee of Le Mistral detailed an incident last year, alleging she subjected a black couple to scrutiny, citing their shoes, Ferragamo, as a point of complaint. As controversy erupted online, Cassandra's name gained significant attention. Despite the public outcry, she remained silent. This wasn't due to fear, but rather a deliberate act of careful consideration and calculation. She had no desire for viral fame or symbolic representation. Her focus was on the long view. She had dedicated her life to creating something enduring and wouldn't allow one overbearing manager to reduce her to a trending topic. That afternoon, she finally settled at her kitchen table. Her laptop was open, and she read silently. She avoided checking the comments section and disregarded any memes. Instead, she focused on a single item, an email from a man she hadn't heard from in years. It read, "Cass, saw the video. You navigated the situation as you always do, with quiet strength. Should you wish to take action regarding this matter, I am available to assist." The document was signed. Harlan Desmond, managing partner, Desmond and Klein Civil Rights Law. She studied the name for a moment. Then, a smile touched her lips. Because now, she was not alone. Many who viewed that video perceived grace and composure. However, those who had grown up with Cassandra Belton would understand the source of that grace and recognize that it had not been easily attained. Cassandra was raised in Southfield, Michigan. Just outside of Detroit, she was raised by her mother, a retired elementary school teacher, and her father, who worked for 35 years at a Chrysler plant. Her parents emphasized listening over silence and instilled in her the understanding that calmness is a strategic tool, particularly for a black woman navigating a world shaped by assumptions. Growing up, she observed her mother skillfully correcting others with a smile and her father successfully resolving disagreements without raising his voice. From these experiences, she developed the ability to carefully consider her words. She understood the value of choosing opportune times and allowing others to display their anxiety before revealing her own. By age 25, Cassandra had obtained her real estate license and was selling homes during her breaks at her banking job. Initially, she focused on smaller, more affordable properties, modest starter homes, often requiring renovation and offering future possibilities. People developed trust in her. She avoided exaggeration and never made misleading claims. Instead, she communicated honestly in a composed manner and consistently maintained her presence. Among her early clients was a recently divorced woman trying to buy her first home on a single income. Cassandra remembered her vividly because the woman broke down, crying in her office after closing. "You were the first person who didn't treat me like a mistake," she said. Those moments stuck with her more than the commission checks ever did. So by the time she sat at her kitchen table in Charlotte, reading Harlan Desmond's email, Cassandra wasn't thinking about revenge. She considered how many individuals wouldn't have responded to the restaurant manager's demeanor as she did, and how many wouldn't have had the advantage of a stranger documenting the incident. Harlan was more than a lawyer. They had been classmates at Michigan State. He had been outspoken then, full of passion and protest signs. She was more reserved, more deliberate, but they held mutual respect for one another. And despite drifting apart over the years, she had continued to follow his career. Civil rights cases in Oakland, police discrimination suits in Tallahassee. He didn't employ a flamboyant courtroom style, but he was remarkably astute. She selected the reply button. Her message was concise. "Let's talk. Tomorrow." The following morning, they convened at a tranquil cafe in Dilworth. Cassandra wore the same white tee and jeans as she did at Le Mistral, as if she was conveying a message, but one only a select few would understand. Harlan was already present, black coffee in hand, eyes surveying the room. He rose as she entered. He made no comment about the video or the headlines. Instead, he gestured towards the seat opposite him. "So," he began, "tell me what you want." She paused briefly before responding, "I want change, but I want it to affect them negatively." He acknowledged her with a nod. "Financial, legal, reputational, everything," she confirmed. He smiled, but it wasn't arrogant. Then she suggested, "Let's start with the company that owns the building. If they're leasing to Le Mistral, they're responsible for what occurs on that property." Cassandra moved closer. "Let me investigate the manager," he stated. "However, yes, there are potential courses of action. Your removal from the business establishment at Giovanni's did not appear to violate policy. If the issue was related to attire, that's a matter of opinion. If it concerned anything else, that's a civil matter." Cassandra took a sip of her tea and inquired, "What about pursuing options beyond simply filing a claim? Do you mean involving the press?" He asked. "No," she replied. "I mean initiating a discussion, perhaps a meeting, something they wouldn't anticipate." He raised his eyebrows. "A formal meeting? With me? And several others?" "Who are these others?" she asked, a faint smile playing on her lips. "People who understand precisely what it's like to be me. And a few who don't, but need to." He hesitated. "Are you certain?" "I'm finished being considerate to safeguard other people's feelings," she stated. "They were at ease when they caused me humiliation. And now she was finished prioritizing other people's comfort at her own expense." The following afternoon, lunchtime proceeded with its typical cadence at Le Mistral. Waiters moved silently between tables, carrying trays of sparkling water and pan-seared halibut. The dining room was filled with the sounds of clinking silverware and quiet conversations. Owen Lindley, the manager, stood behind the host's stand, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning every corner as if anticipating something, though he couldn't say what. Then, a black Cadillac Escalade arrived in front of the restaurant, its windows darkly tinted, reflecting the sidewalk. Initially, no one noticed. This was a place accustomed to seeing high-end cars coming and going. However, the valet paused. As the back door opened, the air seemed to shift subtly. Cassandra Belton emerged first. Her attire mirrored the previous days: white tee, jeans, and suede flats. However, she now wore a long beige trench coat over her clothing. She moved with the quiet certainty of someone who no longer felt the need to prove anything. Following her, 3 more people exited the vehicle. Harlan Desmond, holding a briefcase. A woman in her 60s with thick silver braids, and a serious expression. Dr. Renee Darnell, sociology professor and longtime advocate for racial equity in public spaces, was also present. And last, Andre Weiss, regional director for a high-profile real estate investment group, arrived, sharply dressed in navy slacks and a linen shirt. He had no interest in speaking to the press. His firm owned the building Lumistral rented. Inside, Owen observed the scene from behind the glass doors, his face paling. He turned to his assistant manager and quietly mentioned needing to make a call. However, the opportunity had passed. Cassandra entered the front door without acknowledging anyone, as if she belonged there. This visit wasn't for a meal. She was there to speak. The maitre d' was stunned. "Mom, we're expected," Cassandra stated, her voice calm yet resolute. Andre approached, gestured to the staff, and added, "Conference room, please." It was important to tell Mr. Lindley he should probably be present. The staff offered no objections. 10 minutes later, within the private upstairs room, typically used for wine tastings and corporate parties, the five of them gathered around a polished oak table. Water was served. The door shut. And for the first time, Owen Lindley felt somewhat insignificant. Harlan opened a slim folder and presented a printed copy of the restaurant's dress code. Thus, he began, turning the page. White t-shirts. Prohibited? Owen shifted uncomfortably. "We prefer collared shirts," Harlan repeated, "but not required." He added, "Well, it's about tone, too. Presentation. We have a standard." Harlan nodded toward Cassandra, stating, "Your client is a well-known businesswoman in this community." He continued, "No signs of intoxication. No disruptive behavior." She sat down, quietly reviewed the menu, and was removed. Owen shifted in his seat. "It wasn't personal," he said. "I didn't ask if it was personal," Cassandra said, interrupting for the first time. I repeatedly questioned myself, wondering if I had entered the space with a different complexion. Would you have reacted identically? A profound silence followed. Andre moved closer. "We are not simply engaged in a conversation. This constitutes a breach of the lease agreement. This restaurant functions with a non-discrimination clause stipulated within our leasing terms. You may be the manager, Mr. Lindley, but I represent the organization that owns this building, and we're evaluating your standing." Owen's mouth opened, but he remained silent. Dr. Darnell then spoke. "The incident wasn't isolated. It highlighted the danger of misinterpreting quietude as vulnerability. You anticipated her absence, believing the matter would disappear. However, she didn't require loud pronouncements to be acknowledged. She simply needed to remain present long enough for others to observe you." Owen attempted to dismiss. "Look, if she desires an apology, I don't want your apology," Cassandra stated. "I want accountability, and a change in how people are treated here. Not just me, to all present." The interaction proceeded calmly, without raised voices or legal warnings. 5 individuals were fully aware of their actions, and one man abruptly understood he no longer held authority. Owen Lindley remained still, his shoulders drawn, the knot of his tie subtly pressing against his throat. He was accustomed to being in command. Generally, his voice commanded respect, appearing resolute and conclusive. However, within this room, among these people, it lacked its usual impact. It simply wasn't the same. Harlan Esmond relaxed in his chair, allowing a pause to linger. Next, he put 2 sheets of paper onto the table. Page 1, he stated, is a compilation of grievances submitted by former employees and visitors at this location during the last 18 months. Numerous entries concern dress code regulations. One specifically names you, Mr. Lindley. Owen did not take the papers. Harlan continued, pushing the second sheet across the table. "This is a draft of a formal letter that could be submitted to your building's management and shared with local media. It explains how bias, whether intentional or unintentional, has been a recurring issue, not an isolated incident." "Yes," Owen began. "We don't expect you to apologize," Cassandra added, her voice calm. "This isn't about revenge. It's about correcting a problem. Consider this an opportunity for positive change rather than a criticism." Dr. Darnell then addressed the group. "We reside in a city striving to be perceived as progressive, inclusive, and globally aware. However, incidents such as this reveal underlying realities. The important aspect isn't the initial error, but the actions taken afterward. Andre Weiss, who had remained largely silent until this point, finally moved closer. The board responsible for this property will convene next week. We will be reviewing your lease. Cassandra's situation might be the one captured on video, but we will be looking at the wider context. This includes staff turnover, guest feedback, and Owen's voice faltered slightly when he finally asked, What do you want? Cassandra met his gaze. A public apology, not a generic statement from your PR firm. Your voice, your face. Take responsibility, Owen. Owen blinked. That's acceptable. Cassandra continued, I want to meet with the staff. Front and back of house. Not to lecture, but to talk. About what hospitality really means. What dignity means. Owen nodded slowly, but Harlan raised a hand. That means a formal arrangement. Not a photo op. No cameras. Just people learning how not to repeat the same mistake. Finally, Cassandra added, she wanted the restaurant to fund a quarterly dining program providing complimentary culinary experiences for underserved high school students with an interest in the food industry. Both front of house and back of house positions would be included, allowing them to experience a welcoming environment where they often feel excluded. Owen hesitated. That's a significant undertaking. It's a reasonable proposal, Andre stated before Cassandra could reply. To be direct, if I had sole decision-making power, I would suggest ending the lease completely. I viewed this as a gesture of goodwill. The atmosphere changed noticeably, not due to any increase in physical weight, but because Owen finally grasped the magnitude of the situation. This wasn't centered on him personally, it concerned what he symbolized. And what Cassandra was undertaking was more than just a reaction. It was a fundamental change. He cleared his throat, then stated, okay, I will proceed. No, Cassandra responded, her tone measured. You will initiate it. The distinction is significant. The assembly rose deliberately. Documents were gathered. The water glasses seemed half empty. The room felt strangely calm, but not empty. Something had occurred here, something shifted. As they left the conference room, a young waitress caught Cassandra's eye. She appeared to be no older than 23. The waitress remained silent, offering only a small nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't a gesture of pity, but respect. Cassandra returned a smile, just enough to signal that she recognized her presence. While the main dining room downstairs continued serving truffle risotto and wine, a change was already underway, whether the restaurant was aware or not. The restaurant's apology video was released the next morning. It was brief, lasting just under 2 minutes. The video was filmed inside Le Mistral's main dining room, with the bar visible in the background. Owen Lindley appeared standing in front of a small round table, his shoulders square, but his face visibly strained. The video utilized no dramatic lighting and avoided flashy editing. A man appeared, looking as if he hadn't rested properly in days. My name is Owen Lindley, he began, and I want to speak directly to Ms. Cassandra Belton, and to anyone who saw the video of our interaction. He spoke without a prepared text. This was evident. His delivery was occasionally halting, but these imperfections only served to strengthen his words. He confessed the truth, that he had formed a judgment based on appearance, that he responded emotionally rather than thoughtfully, that he permitted personal prejudice to supersede policy and professionalism. Then he made the unexpected declaration. I didn't perceive her, truly, and that's the crux of the matter. The internet erupted almost instantly. Concerns arose. Was the apology sincere? Was it too delayed? A deliberate tactic? However, the most impactful element for many viewers wasn't Owen. It was Cassandra, who published a written statement 1 hour later. The statement was brief, consisting of just 4 paragraphs on her business website. There were no hashtags. It lacked a viral feel. She didn't boast. She didn't seek compassion. She simply detailed the events. This is what she requested and what the restaurant committed to providing. She specifically highlighted the new program for aspiring culinary students at Willow Creek Culinary Institute. She also expressed her gratitude to the ownership group of the Golden Spoon for collaborating with her directly. Finally, In the concluding line, she wrote, "Dignity isn't something you demand. It's something you carry. And when it's denied, you don't always need to fight to get it back. Sometimes you just need to stand still long enough for people to see it was always there." The written announcement gained traction even more rapidly than the video itself. Cassandra's inbox was overwhelmed once more. However, this time it was distinct. Local charitable organizations contacted her seeking collaboration on the student dining initiative. A restaurant group in Seattle inquired if she would address their leadership team. Even the mayor's office conveyed a discreet message, acknowledging her actions. However, not all reactions were positive. Some individuals asserted that she was exploiting the situation, either by attributing racial undertones or capitalizing on the opportunity. A commentator on a local news segment accused her of attempting to dismiss a dedicated manager. Cassandra did not respond to these accusations. Instead, she prioritized the students. The initial event occurred just 3 weeks afterward. 15 high school juniors and seniors from West Charlotte and Harding University High arrived at La Mistral after hours, accompanied by their culinary arts teachers. The staff had thoroughly cleaned the kitchen. 3 chefs generously donated their time to instruct the students on plating, preparation, and service. Cassandra remained largely quiet that evening, moving between tables and observing them slice, stir, and taste with focused expressions. One student, a girl just under 5 feet tall with purple braids and intense concentration, turned to her after trying her initial attempt at risotto and exclaimed, "I didn't even know food could taste like this." Cassandra smiled and replied, "It can. And so can opportunity." Meanwhile, Owen was not present at the restaurant that evening. Following the incident, he was transitioned away from daily operations and now holds a limited administrative position at the corporate office. This wasn't a dramatic dismissal, but rather a quiet consequence, precisely the outcome Cassandra had intended. Her aim wasn't to destroy someone's life, but to ensure they lived with a lasting reminder. That reminder now manifested as 15 eager young students, laughing and learning inside a restaurant that had once attempted to exclude someone like them. The situation seemed almost unbelievable. The very establishment that had previously rejected Cassandra due to not aligning with its perceived atmosphere was now undergoing a noticeable change, occurring one table, one lesson at a time. 2 months later, Cassandra was standing outside a quiet little cafe in Durham, North Carolina, enjoying a courte-à-deux while awaiting her lunch date. This was not a business engagement. She had taken the day off. She had driven 2 hours from Charlotte simply to clear her head and connect with an old friend. The events surrounding La Mistral were in the past for her. Largely, the video was no longer prominent on trending lists. The restaurant had recovered under a new temporary manager, and the student culinary program, it continued with another session planned for next month. Cassandra had decided she would no longer supervise it directly. It was now in the hands of the students. As she sat beneath the awning, sunlight spreading across the pavement, a young woman wearing a UNC hoodie passed by, slowed, and turned back. "Excuse me, are you Cassandra Belton?" Cassandra looked up. She nodded once. The girl offered a wide smile. "I saw your video, the one involving the restaurant. I simply wanted to express my gratitude. You presented things authentically, like a mature woman would." Cassandra laughed quietly. "That's a way to describe it. No, truly. You conveyed your message without creating unnecessary drama. My aunt speaks of you as if you were Michelle Obama's older relative." They both chuckled. The girl waved goodbye, maintaining her smile. Cassandra didn't require external approval. That moment held significance, not due to vanity, but because it indicated that the appropriate individuals were observing. The next generation was noting how matters were being addressed. Subsequently, that afternoon, she entered a small bistro located across the street for lunch. The host, a man in his 20s with a nose ring and slightly frayed cuffs on his sleeves, looked up and offered her a sincere smile. "Welcome," he said. "Are you dining alone or expecting someone?" "Alone," she replied. A window seat was acceptable, ideal even. He took a menu and guided her to a booth where sunlight streamed across the table. He didn't pause. He didn't scrutinize her attire. Her outfit consisted of a simple linen shirt and cream-colored slacks. As he went to fetch her water, Cassandra surveyed the restaurant. A couple murmured quietly near the back. Two women enjoyed a dessert together. A man on his laptop typed rapidly, as if the world was about to end. It was normal, ordinary, beautiful in its simplicity. She recalled that day at Le Mistral, the shift in Owen Lindley's expression, the subtle encouragement she received, the critical commentary as well, the burden of being thrust into a pivotal moment when all she desired was lunch. She held no regrets, because that moment had shown her and reminded others that silence isn't the lack of strength. Sometimes it's the most profound kind of strength, the kind that listens, that waits, that observes, anticipating the opportune moment to act. And when it acts, it seeks no authorization. She retrieved her phone and launched her notes application. A sentence appeared at the top of a fresh page. Don't waste your voice on noise. Save it for the echo. She remembered hearing that from her mother years ago. It wasn't about remaining silent. It was about being thoughtful. Be precise. Utilize your presence like a scalpel, not a hammer. As the waiter returned with her water and a polite, "Take your time," Cassandra smiled. She didn't need to assert herself today. She didn't need to demonstrate anything. She had already accomplished that. And in doing so, she left a lasting impact, not only on a restaurant, but on everyone who witnessed her maintain her composure without aggression, who observed the power of choosing dignity over conflict and still achieving success. That was the core understanding. Change doesn't always require a loud voice. It requires remaining steadfast until others understand the significance of silence. If this story resonated with you, please share it. Discuss it with others. If you haven't already, please subscribe. More stories like this, the quiet ones that speak loudest, are forthcoming. Mr. Braddock, the calculus teacher at Eisenberg High in Elkhart, Indiana, made a light-hearted gesture, singling out the janitor for amusement in front of the class. However, when a man calmly approached the board and solved the problem with unexpected skill, the room fell silent, fundamentally altering the school's perception of him. This occurred during fourth period on a Thursday, a typical day at Eisenberg High where students often watch the clock more than the lesson. Mr. Braddock had a certain reputation. Known for his sharp wit, impatience, and sarcastic remarks, he was a figure who evoked tolerance rather than affection. The classroom felt stale. Equations covered the whiteboard. A subtle scent of eraser dust and old sneakers permeated the air. Phones lay hidden beneath desks. A few students feigned attention, while others gazed out the window. Then, an event occurred, altering the classroom's atmosphere dramatically. While Mr. Braddock wrote another derivative on the board, a quiet squeak drifted in from the hallway. The janitor was close by, mopping just outside the classroom with his characteristic slow, steady pace. Braddock stopped speaking, looked toward the door, and gave a slight smile. Suddenly, he turned to the class and indicated the hallway. "Look who's here," he said. "Tell me, do you think you can solve this one?" He struck the board with his marker, mimicking a game show challenge. A ripple of laughter followed, not loud, but the type that makes you subtly adjust your posture, unsure of its appropriateness. Mr. Braddock smiled knowingly. "Come on, Lamar." Lamar Dorsey, a 52-year-old janitor, stood in the hallway, holding his mop. The familiar blue uniform, clean but faded, was on him, displaying L. Dorsey embroidered above his chest pocket. He remained still, showing no reaction. His gaze swept across the room. Then, deliberately, he entered. A mop rested against the wall. Several students straightened. Some anticipated a clever remark or a sudden departure. Perhaps a jest or simply a walkout. However, that didn't happen. Instead, Lamar proceeded to the front of the room. "You mind?" he inquired quietly, indicating the board with a gesture. Braddock raised his brows. "Be my guest." Several phones silently emerged from backpacks. One girl whispered, "Is he serious?" But nobody interrupted Lamar. He picked up the marker, examined the equation, and paused, not because he was unsure, but as if he were considering something. Intensely, like someone studying a well-known map. He narrowed his eyes slightly. Then he began to write. There was no theatrics, no embellishment, just careful strokes, one line following another. The room became unnervingly quiet. The only sounds were the marker on the whiteboard and a chair creaking as someone leaned forward. Mr. Braddock crossed his arms, observing intently. His expression remained unchanged, though his jaw tightened. Lamar explained the steps aloud, his voice quiet and patient. See, this here's a chain rule problem, but the trick is recognizing the inner function first. Once you isolate that, it becomes a lot cleaner. He moved with the ease of someone experienced, not just with the problem, but with the teaching. His manner was unassuming and not arrogant. He clarified matters straightforwardly, with clarity, as if he's dedicated more effort to instruction than to menial tasks. Upon completion, he secured the marker and retreated. The board displayed meticulous, well-structured work. He addressed Braddock, then the class. That's one approach, he stated. And briefly, stillness reigned. A junior student in the rear murmured. He understood it correctly. Mr. Braddock remained silent. Not instantly. His mouth parted a little, but no words emerged. The silence became more pronounced than any joke he could have delivered. Lamar nodded politely and retreated to the door. He gathered his mop. There was no applause, no self-promotion, only that quiet assurance, as if he hadn't just dramatically altered the room. But as Lamar reached for the chalk, no one anticipated what would follow. No one stirred. For a complete 10 seconds, it felt as though the class had been pulled from a dream and placed into something authentic. The sort of moment that doesn't typically occur in a high school classroom. Lamar Dorsey, known as Mr. Dorsey, was in the process of leaving when a comment was made. Had he just thought that? It was Wes Hanley, a senior seated in the front row, who rarely spoke unless it concerned academic performance. He was completely serious. His eyes were wide with surprise. He glanced back at the board, as if a solution might have altered during a brief moment of closure. Braddock then spoke, his tone even and somewhat annoyed. He acknowledged that Mr. Dorsey had, nonetheless, provided the correct answer. His voice lacked its typical sarcasm. A different feeling seemed present, perhaps confusion, or even something like discomfort. Lamar looked back. I worked with numbers extensively in the past, he stated, then offered a slight shrug. They remain with me. Several students chuckled, not directed at him this time, but because the atmosphere was easing. Lamar didn't pause for a reply. He departed, mop in hand, his shoes squeaking quietly down the hallway, as if nothing had occurred. It was as if he hadn't just resolved a complex academic challenge in less than 3 minutes without using a calculator. That's when the phones appeared. Someone had recorded the entire incident. Carly Benson, a junior in the third row, had already begun editing the video before the school bell sounded. In the hallway between classes, the topic of conversation was solely focused on the event. Did you see Mr. Dorsey? Braddock's expression. He appeared as if someone had disconnected him. Where did he acquire that knowledge? It was believed he only cleaned floors. By lunchtime, the video appeared on TikTok and then Instagram. It was unedited, simply a shaky view of Lamar's hands working on the board, accompanied by a voice saying, "Yo, he's solving it." The text accompanying the video stated, "Our janitor just outperformed the calculus teacher." Some people found it amusing. Others observed it with disbelief. Nevertheless, the excitement continued to build. In the teacher's lounge, the atmosphere was similarly charged. Are you suggesting he completed a full derivative chain problem mentally? Inquired Ms. Lin, the physics teacher. She had paused, mid-bite of her sandwich, and so did he, muttered Mr. Crane, the English teacher. Didn't use notes. Didn't even pause. It was like muscle memory. Braddock was at the corner table, seemingly grading papers. He remained silent. However, Principal Everett spoke. He had been at the school for 6 years. It was surprising that no one knew he had an academic background. People shook their heads. Few people really knew much about Lamar. He arrived early. He left late. The floors were always clean. Light bulbs rarely failed within a day. The man worked in silence. However, he was no longer simply the man behind the mop. Down the hallway, a group of students waited near the janitor's closet, They weren't there to report a spill or request a broom. They simply wanted to speak with him. One student, a 12-year-old boy holding his geometry book, inquired, "Do you tutor Mr. Dorsey?" Lamar blinked. "I haven't in a long time," he replied. "You should," the boy suggested. That was a kind thing to say. Lamar chuckled, but it wasn't unkind. "I'm simply astonished." During the third period the following day, Braddock's demeanor had changed. He refrained from making jokes. He didn't call on students arbitrarily. He spoke with his gaze directed at the board, his voice more subdued than normal. It wasn't voiced directly, but it was obvious to all. Following the class, Wes approached him. "Mr. Braddock, regarding that incident with Mr. Dorsey yesterday, he employed the very method you demonstrated last week. The chain rule, correct?" Braddock nodded once. "That is correct, only he articulated it more effectively." Braddock remained silent. However, the truly startling aspect wasn't the proposed solution itself. It was what Lamar said following it. Lamar Dorsey hadn't intended to create a disturbance. He generally avoided being the focus of attention. This had been the case since his youth. Consequently, when students began congregating near the maintenance closet simply to converse, or when teachers directed extended glances his way in the hallways, he felt uneasy. He lowered his gaze and continued with his regular activities. Restocking paper towels, repairing a leaky faucet in the boys' locker room, and cleaning cafeteria tables consumed his time. However, he began to notice a subtle change. There was a perceptible shift in how people regarded him, as if they were attempting to place him within a framework they hadn't previously recognized. This wasn't merely curiosity, it was a mixture of confusion, respect, and perhaps regret. The sensation made him uncomfortable. Later that afternoon, Principal Everett requested that he visit the front office. He entered, still wearing his gloves, his uniform slightly damp from cleaning the cafeteria sinks. He took off his cap as a gesture of respect. Everett leaned forward in his chair, his hands clasped together. "Lamar, may I ask you a question? Do you have experience in education or engineering?" Lamar paused. He glanced downwards briefly, as if revisiting a long-forgotten aspect of himself. "I attended Purdue," he said softly. "Mechanical engineering. Full scholarship." The principal leaned back, eyebrows raised. "You serious?" was Lamar's reply. He had plans. Things got complicated, and for the first time in a long while, he began to recount the story. He'd grown up in Gary, Indiana. A bright young man, he's always been fascinated by how things worked. Motors, pulleys, anything he could take apart and put back together. His mother, Estelle, raised him and his two sisters on her own. She worked overtime at a textile plant and still found time to read to them every night. She held a deep conviction that education offered the sole path to advancement, frequently stating, "Books first, always." She explained that the world might attempt to deny opportunity, but possessing your own key ensured access. Lamar secured that key. He was valedictorian, a winner at the state science fair, and then received a scholarship to Purdue. During his freshman year, he was already tutoring fellow students. Instructors noticed his name on the attendance roster and took note. However, sophomore year brought a life-altering phone call. His mother had collapsed at work. Medical professionals diagnosed her with advanced cancer. When Lamar arrived at the hospital, she was struggling to remain conscious. "I can handle this," she murmured. He disregarded her request and did not return home. He took a semester off from school, then another. He found employment, working in a warehouse and doing overnight shifts at a grocery store. He worked to cover expenses. Academic pursuits became less important. So did the dream. When his mother died, possessions were disorganized. He lacked a place to return to, lacked funds to complete his degree, and received no communication from a guidance counselor checking on his absence. "I repeatedly thought I would return to school," Lamar told Everett. But one situation led to another. Life doesn't wait for anyone. The principal remained silent. The narrative carried weight, not melodrama. It was simply authentic, the sort of existence one rarely encounters unless actively inquired about. At his residence, Lamar stored his academic records in a box situated beneath his bed. He possessed a faded Purdue sweatshirt, an antique calculator, and a photograph of himself and his mother from orientation day. He had not used any of these items, yet he kept them. Now they were being revisited. That evening, he was seated on the rear steps of his modest apartment complex. The sky was dusky, with a stillness punctuated only by the distant murmur of vehicles. He drank tea from a metal thermos and gazed into the distance. It had been years since he's considered calculus. It had been a while since his last tutoring job, before he left school, and now it reappeared, like a familiar face at his door. But a single choice threatened to undo all his efforts. While in college, Lamar had vowed to take a brief respite, stabilize his family situation, and then complete his education successfully. However, life rarely follows plans, particularly those founded on hope. Following his mother's passing, Lamar went back to Gary, attempting to rebuild. His sisters were still in high school, struggling to manage. Bills accumulated on the counter. The landlord demanded rent, and no one from Purdue contacted him to inquire about his disappearance. He accepted any available work. He worked as a stockroom loader, a janitor at a strip mall, and provided overnight security at a shipping yard. Anything that provided sufficient income to pay the electricity bill. His education receded further and further from his immediate concerns. Initially, he would occasionally contact the university to inquire about reapplying and transferring credits. Forms were sent to him. He completed them. However, he didn't mail them. There was always an obstacle. Then came a critical moment. It occurred in late November. A man named Frank Booker, the owner of a flooring company in South Bend, had offered Lamar consistent employment. "You're capable," he stated. "Don't squander your time sweeping floors. I'll personally train you." Lamar felt hopeful again, having a genuine opportunity. However, the day before his start date, his youngest sister, Alana, was involved in a school altercation. A disagreement that quickly worsened. She had injured someone's nose. Expulsion was threatened. Lamar felt compelled to be present. No one else would support her. Consequently, he missed his first day at the flooring job. Frank reassigned the position to another person. And that was the end of it. An opportunity was lost. He relinquished his pursuit of dreams and instead prioritized stability. Years passed indistinctly. He moved from town to town, holding various jobs. He maintained a clean record and avoided legal issues, simply focusing on survival. Quietly. When he reached Elkhart in his early 40s, he wasn't seeking a fresh start. He simply wanted a reliable income. The school district provided benefits. Summers were peaceful. He accepted the janitor position without hesitation. He found it agreeable in his own way. It was predictable. The work was clean. Students left him undisturbed. Teachers offered polite smiles. He didn't anticipate friendship or belonging. He didn't require it. He remained inconspicuous. He cleaned up messes and vanished before the last bell rang. Yet, numbers remained with him. Occasionally, after successfully completing a math course, he would briefly observe the board. He'd see a formula and mentally solve it. It felt akin to muscle memory, a facet of his mind that remained keen even as other aspects succumbed to the weight of habit. He would return home, prepare a simple supper, grilled fish, brown rice, perhaps some carrots, and peruse a vintage engineering book he stored behind the cereal boxes, just to confirm his abilities. He invariably did. He simply lacked an opportunity to demonstrate them. Then Mr. Braddock addressed him that day. And now, changes were occurring, not only at school, but also within him. He reflected on the students who waited outside his supply closet with questions. He thought about Wes Hamley visiting that morning with a folded piece of paper and saying, "Mr. Dorsey, I attempted to solve that same problem. Could you review it for me?" And Lamar had, with care, methodically. He clarified where Wes had made a mistake without causing embarrassment. Wes smiled when he finally grasped the concept. It wasn't solely a matter of pride. It was about a sense of belonging. That feeling lingered. However, not everyone reacted positively. Braddock, in particular, became unusually reserved. Students observed it. Teachers observed it. The experience of being surpassed by someone he hadn't previously considered a significant figure in front of his class clearly affected him. He didn't respond aggressively. Instead, his responses became more abrupt, his tolerance diminished. Any mention of Lamar in the lounge was swiftly redirected. He was not accustomed to being overshadowed, especially not by someone who had been unknown to him until now. But life held one more surprise, and this one brought him back to mathematics. The video didn't remain within Eisenberg High. It spread beyond. It began with a local student page reposting it, accompanied by the caption, "When your janitor turns out to be smarter than your teacher." Then it appeared on a regional education forum. By the weekend, it had spread across state lines. People online were astonished. They weren't mocking Lamar, they were impressed. He explained it with greater clarity than my college professor. Someone should give this man a classroom and a chalkboard, not a mop. It's a reminder that you never know someone's story. By Monday morning, Lamar had no idea any of this was occurring. He didn't use social media. He still had a flip phone. When he arrived at work, the first thing he did was repair a jammed paper towel dispenser in the girls' bathroom, just like he always did on Mondays. But something felt different. Conversations stopped as he passed. Students nodded, not out of duty, but with an unusual sense of respect. Some even smiled, as if meeting him for the first time. "Hey, Mr. Dorsey," a girl called out as he neared the library. "You're kind of famous now." Lamar chuckled quietly. However, when he rounded the corner, Wes Hamley was there, accompanied by two other students. One held a calculus book. A problem was indicated, marked in pink. "Would you mind going through this with us?" Wes asked. Lamar looked around, seemingly confused. "You got a free period?" Someone inquired. We made time. And so, in the hallway, surrounded by lockers and science fair posters, Lamar sat down on the floor with three teenagers and guided them through a multivariable equation. Step by step, line by line. He didn't lecture them. He engaged with them. It wasn't boisterous or extravagant, but a significant moment unfolded. Further down the hallway, someone recorded the incident. Lamar wasn't informed. He likely would have disapproved. Returning to the office, Principal Everett was speaking with a member of the local school board. Affirming the information, she stated, "Lamar Dorsey. He's been with us for 6 years. No, he's not faculty. He's a custodian." She hesitated, then responded, "Well, I wouldn't describe it as unorthodox. I'd say it was overlooked." Simultaneously, in the teacher's lounge, Braddock was reviewing an email shared by a parent containing a link to the now viral video. He closed the laptop without watching it. That afternoon, Everett called Lamar back in, offered him a seat. Lamar stayed standing. "I've got a request from the board," the principal said. "They want to know if you'd be interested in running an after-school tutoring program. Small group, voluntary, just a trial run." Lamar didn't answer right away. "You'd be paid, of course," Everett added. "This isn't about changing your existing responsibilities, but rather expanding them." Reflecting on the skills he still possesses, Lamar glanced at his hands. They were calloused, clean, and worn. "I haven't taught in a long time," he stated. "You haven't ceased to know," Everett responded. Lamar raised his gaze. There was no strain evident in the man's tone, only a straightforward suggestion. "I will consider it," he said. That evening, he retrieved the aged cardboard box from beneath his bed. It contained the Purdue sweatshirt, the transcripts, and the orientation photo. He hadn't touched it in years. He spread everything out on the table. The paper had yellowed slightly. The edges were curled, but the words remained. That was the nature of knowledge. It didn't fade. It simply waited. He didn't need to become popular online. He didn't care about the views or the comments. But knowing he could still make a difference resonated with him. However, while some were impressed, others were not pleased by his growing recognition. As Lamar gained more recognition, the school environment started to change. This transformation initially manifested in the student body. Those who previously ignored him in the hallways began to greet him. Some even sought his assistance with homework during class breaks. Within 2 weeks, a small group of students had informally established what they termed Dorsey sessions. After school, they would gather in the library, notebooks ready, concentrating as Lamar elucidated ideas with a surprising clarity that everyone acknowledged. Soon, teachers noticed. Ms. Lynn, the physics teacher, was the first to visit the library and observe him assisting the students. "You possess a talent," she remarked gently, "and it's not limited to calculations." However, not all reactions were positive. Mr. Braddock had remained silent regarding Lamar since the initial event. Within the teacher's lounge, he presented an outward appearance of normalcy. However, his silences betrayed a lingering bitterness. His speech was concise and abrupt. He avoided direct eye contact with Lamar and never referenced calculus. During a parent-teacher meeting, when Lamar's increasing impact on the students was discussed, Braddock stated, "It's good they're interested in math. Let's just make sure we don't blur the line between instruction and inspiration." While seemingly courteous, the underlying tone was unmistakable to everyone present. The principal didn't ignore the situation. He summoned Braddock to his office one morning and explained the issue directly. "I know it was difficult," Everett remarked, "but Lamar didn't shame you. He motivated them," Braddock conceded, adjusting in his chair. "He may lack formal credentials, but he's educated significantly more than we initially understood. And crucially, he's connecting with students in a manner that we haven't been able to." Braddock started to speak, then stopped. There was little to add. Lamar continued with his established schedule. He didn't request an official position. He didn't desire any preferential consideration. However, when Principal Harding suggested a small payment to continue the tutoring sessions, he agreed. The motivation wasn't financial, it simply felt appropriate. Consequently, he began carrying a small binder. Within it were pages of problems, blank worksheets, and notes he'd written by hand. During breaks, he'd sit in the back corner of the cafeteria and jot down formulas from memory, sometimes acknowledging a student who'd call out, "Hey, Mr. D." One afternoon, Carly, the student who filmed the original clip, approached him near the vending machines. "Did you ever want to be a teacher?" she asked. Lamar paused before replying. "I want to build things. Teach later, maybe, but life had different ideas." Carly responded, handing him a new mechanical pencil. "I think you're doing both now." He smiled. "Thank you." However, beneath this pleasantness, there was underlying tension. Some parents had begun contacting the school. While the response was largely positive, a single, anonymous concern reached the board. The question raised was whether it was appropriate for a janitor to tutor students within the school. Concerns were also voiced regarding his certification and background checks for instruction. Everett addressed the matter promptly. He is a district employee and has not acted inappropriately. It was suggested that if genuine concern was the driver, a direct conversation with me would have occurred. He did not inform Lamar about the complaint. Nevertheless, Lamar sensed a subtle tension present. Some individuals seemed unsure how to perceive him now that he no longer blended into the periphery. Then, one afternoon, Braddock took an unexpected action. He entered the library during one of Lamar's tutoring sessions. He observed silently from a distance as Lamar explained integrals to a group of 4 students. After roughly 10 minutes, he approached. "Do you mind if I sit in?" Braddock inquired. Lamar looked up. His expression remained unchanged. He gestured toward a chair. The students laughed, just enough to lighten the moment. Braddock smirked. For once, it wasn't mean. They sat together that day, saying little, but it was a start. Lamar Dorsey wasn't interested in titles. He had something else in mind. It wasn't about proving anything anymore. For Lamar Dorsey, standing at the whiteboard in the library with students gathered around, it was never about redemption or revenge. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He didn't seek recognition. He simply showed up for them, the kids, the ones who reminded him of the boy he once was. Every Tuesday and Thursday, right after the final bell, that corner of the library filled with chatter, questions, scribbled notes, and wide eyes as Lamar walked students through math problems they once feared. Not because he possessed all the answers, but because he helped them believe they could discover those answers themselves. That's what mattered. Isaiah, a freshman who previously struggled with algebra last semester, is now confidently solving quadratic equations. Tasha, who once disliked math, is now conducting brief study groups on weekends for her cousins, utilizing notes from Lamar. Lamar didn't lecture from the front of the room like a conventional teacher. Instead, he sat alongside his students, engaged in conversation, and posed questions before providing answers. Consequently, an increasing number of teachers began visiting. They weren't there to monitor, but simply to observe his methods. Ms. Lin inquired about utilizing some of his explanations in her class. Coach Rivera asked if Lamar would assist in establishing a summer preparation group for incoming freshmen. Even Braddock, typically hesitant and prideful, began visiting frequently. While not every day, he visited often enough. He would quietly suggest a couple of additional problems and eventually started offering words of encouragement to the students. The sharpness in his voice lessened. A change occurred within him, softening his demeanor. During one tutoring session, Braddock stayed behind after the students had departed. "You know," he remarked, glancing at the board, "I once believed this position conferred significance upon me. That teaching provided authority." Lamar remained silent. "But you're showing me what it truly involves, consistently being present and ensuring that each moment has value." Lamar simply nodded in agreement. Everyone occasionally strays from their path. He was not one to bear resentment. He had no need to. Principal Everett summoned him again a month later. A suggestion was put forward to establish his sessions as a non-credit elective class next semester, designed for enrichment and to build students' confidence. Everett cautioned that we would need to navigate some administrative processes. Lamar responded, shaking his head gently, and stated that he appreciated the offer but did not require the formal recognition. He preferred to maintain a simple approach, encouraging attendance based on genuine interest rather than a fixed schedule. Everett agreed, nodding, and assured him that they would provide support in any way possible. News of his efforts extended past the school district. A reporter from a local news outlet visited to conduct an interview. Lamar chose to keep his comments brief, avoiding sensationalism and self-promotion. "I'm simply demonstrating what they already possess," he stated. "Sometimes it requires a bit of time to recognize it." In the spring, Eisenberg High held its yearly student showcase, featuring science projects, art displays, and choir performances. In one corner of the gym, a booth called Dorsey's Table showcased student reflections on math, life, and confidence. Many students wrote about how Lamar had helped them discover more about themselves. This wasn't because he provided answers, but because he listened and showed belief. By the end of the night, people had stopped asking, "Is he the janitor?" Instead, they were saying, "That's Mr. Dorsey. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't give a speech. He stood near the table, smiled, and expressed gratitude to the students who approached." Afterwards that evening, returning to his apartment, he retrieved the well-worn Purdue sweatshirt from the box beneath his bed. He refrained from wearing it. Instead, he folded it carefully, placed it inside a fresh storage container, and added a file containing student thank-you notes alongside it. He understood that legacy isn't defined by positions. It's about the impact you create in others. He didn't require completing school to instruct. He didn't need a degree to guide. He simply needed to be present each day and demonstrate genuine care. And that's precisely what he intended to continue. Thank you for hearing Lamar's story. If it resonated with you, if it brought to mind someone you may have underestimated or someone who offered you support, please subscribe and share it with someone who could benefit from it. Because sometimes the most brilliant intellects reside in the most unassuming environments.